Welcome back to the channel, everyone. My name is Kevin Strange. I'm a cartoonist, novelist, and a filmmaker, and I'm here today to share with you my love of comic books. And today we're going to talk about Marc Silvestri's Cyberforce #1, but more generally, we're going to talk about a lot of things today, gang. So settle in and get your little pencils and your little crayons out and doodle along with me while I rant and rave here about comic books. Before we get started, I am a comic book maker myself, and I have a Patreon. You can subscribe to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description. For $2.99 a month, you get access to all of my comic books. It's like bordering on, after I release my next book, like 700 pages of comics available behind the Patreon paywall. All of my novels, which is like 18 horror books, bizarro novels, and 7 feature films that I made when I was a spry young lad in my 20s and early 30s. Been in the game almost 20 years of telling the gnarly underground Strangeville stories. What you can get there at the Patreon are books like Wizard of Ganj, which is the story of the origin of the Colombian smokeweed. My characters, Nixon and Hogan, are Strangeville's resident dope dealers, even though they are jobless and sit around jerking off to tranny porn and playing video games all day. They still manage to somehow score the best weed in Strangeville. This is the story of where that weed comes from, and it's Hogan always finds this bag of Colombian smokeweed in front of the same tree out in the woods by Nixon's house. And this time, when he goes to pick it up, this dude with little hands reaches out, snatches it. Hogan gets into a tug of war, pulled into the tree, and pops out into Weed World, where he ends up getting his weed ganked by the Weed Wizard, who bounds off into Weed World and beyond. And Nixon and Hogan have to contend with the ganja gremlins, the bong bats, and so many more weird creatures, denizens of Weed World in the 420 dimension. You can get that, and you can get my ode to Ebenezer Scrooge and A Christmas Carol, a la stoner shit, in issues #1 and 2 of Too Many Dabs, the story of Frankie the Fruit Fucker, who challenges Nixon and Hogan to a dab smoking contest, smokes too much, and accidentally blows his consciousness into outer space, where he has to do a battle of wits with Nixon and Hogan as machine elves, who show Frankie all the bad shit he's done in his life, a la Ebenezer Scrooge. It's A Christmas Carol, stoner style. Check all that out at the Patreon link below. So let's talk, gang. Let's have a little discussion about pop culture and pop culture trends that take hold and just never seem to die, no matter how much time passes. The speculator boom of the 1990s, the comic book speculator boom of the 1990s, which came about shortly after the launch of Image Comics, when all of the creators, Todd McFarlane, Marc Silvestri, Eric Larson, Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee, all these fellas left their projects at Marvel because they weren't getting, as Todd said, you wouldn't even give me a T-shirt, pal, bud. You wouldn't even give me a T-shirt with my art on it, let alone pay me for it. My dad got a watch. We sold millions of books for you guys. So they bailed on Marvel, started their own company, and shortly afterward, the comic book speculator market emerged where people scooped up thousands and thousands of these books, especially these number ones of all these books. But Image was especially because these were brand new series that they didn't have like a history of 60, 70 years worth of publications. So people jumped on these, and the market crashed. And since about fucking 1996, people have shit all over these Image comics because everybody bought them thinking that they were going to put their kids through college. And sort of comics in general went from being a kind of a disposable, trashy, disposable entertainment to, I like the speed lines there for velocity. It's a cool picture. Marc Silvestri's a motherfucker of a illustrator. He worked on X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, and Wolverine before he came over here. And that's what we're I'm getting to that. I'm getting to that, gang. Give me a moment. Let me collect my thoughts. So this speculator market basically rendered these Image comics, especially these number ones, because there were millions of copies of these things printed to sort of try to appease that speculator boom. They're basically worth nothing. You get these in dollar bins and quarter bins all across the country. This particular issue of Cyberforce cost me 40 cents, so I could probably wipe my ass with this issue of Cyberforce for less money than it costs for a roll of toilet paper. In fact, I think that's absolutely true. And so these books, by and large, they get no respect because to this day, this pervasive idea, the mainstream zeitgeist of comic books in America is, well, that's something you collect and save it so you can put your kids through college in the future. But them comics ain't worth nothing. It's like this paradox of comic collecting where it's like, on the one hand, people, normies, they can't see comic books for anything other than a piece of a collector item that should go up in value and become extremely valuable, but also that they didn't, and remember that they crashed and they're not worth anything, and they're not worth the paper they're printed on. This is pervasive to this day. People still believe that the only reason to buy a comic book is because it might be worth money someday. And it's like there have been these other weird moments in pop culture and in like pop culture history where something bubbles up into the mainstream and then never goes away. One example of that I've always found bizarre is the late 80s, early 90s Domino's Pizza promotion, 30 minutes or less or it's free. Now that shit didn't go on for more than a year, maybe 2 years, but no matter how much fucking time passes, this idea that if your food isn't delivered to you in 30 minutes or less, it should be free has never gone away. That it remains this mainstream idea, and it's always followed by laughter. Well, if it ain't here in 30 minutes, it's free, right? Which is another one of those like paradoxes where it's like, on one hand, they will never, the mainstream normies will never stop referencing this 30 minutes are free nonsense, while also understanding that it's absurd and it doesn't happen. It's the same thing with comics. It's like, you think that's going to be worth something? They ain't worth nothing. Another example would be pro wrestling. In the 1990s, pro wrestling was exposed as a work. And so for the rest of forever, normies, that bubbled up into the mainstream, and the normies will say, wrestling, that shit's fake, right? And it never, like, wrestling will never escape that that idea in normies' heads. It's like, well, it's all fake. And just bear with me, gang, bear with me. One final weirdness that I find about the mainstream, and I hope you're catching my drift here. What I mean by these things that just never go away, even though they contradict themselves, is not true. Is when Coke, like this was also I believe it was the early '90s, when Coke released New Coke, and it was so Coca-Cola released New Coke, which was so universally panned, and it probably tasted exactly the fucking same. It's just branding, marketing, the logos, labels. New Coke went over so poorly that to this day, like 40 years later, 35 years later, they still, when they reverted back, they still call Coca-Cola Coca-Cola Classic. There is no new Coke on the market. There hasn't been new Coke on the market for 35 fucking years. But they still call it Coca-Cola Classic because this pervasive idea of like, well, that's not new Coke, is it? This idea that normies know there's no new Coke. They know it doesn't exist anymore. But if you stopped calling it Coca-Cola Classic, even 35 years later, normies would immediately go, well, is that Coca-Cola Classic or is it new Coke? Because it doesn't say on the can. Knowing full well that there's no new Coke. So these Image comics from the early 90s, not only are they shit on for just being comics by the normies. Well, that's not going to be worth no money. But comics fans, even though they learned a long time ago, I'm talking like hardcore comics fans, they learned a long time ago that most comic books, 90% of comic books that you collect aren't going to be worth very much money. They're not going to go up very high in value. There are exceptions to this, and you have to, you can dig and collect. And we love dollar bin digging, on this channel, and we love, collecting comics. But the idea, they call them keys now, where there are these keys that have small print runs or a limited edition, and that you can collect those, you can slab them, you can get them GCG graded, and then those can be worth money. But that's like, there's like the collector market, and then there's like the rest of comic book collecting. But everyone throughout comics disrespects the shit out of these early Image comics for not just that reason, but largely because of that reason, that these things were overprinted and everybody has them and they're not worth the paper they're printed on. As stories, as comics, as characters, however, I love the Image comics because they're, these are crazy, hyper masculine comics, made directly, just like tapped into the imagination of a 12-year-old boy and brought to life. And these comics were cranked out. That early Image time period was like a grindhouse where these comics were just produced at rapid speed, just as many of these things, because they were making so much money that you needed new issues, you needed new books, you needed these things to keep coming. The more new books we have, the more money we make, and that went on for a few years. And so these are considered like low quality or lowbrow comics, and I don't find a problem with that. I come from the underground horror world. Okay, I worked in a video store from the time I was 19 till the time I was 25, and my favorite movies, some of my favorite, like I love shitty movies. I love low budget movies, especially low budget horror, low budget genre movies, sci-fi, horror, cult classics. The idea of a cult classic is it's a movie that was widely panned upon release, but over time it developed a small but rabid cult following. And I think that these Image comics are like a reverse of that, if that makes any sense. Let me build this argument up a little bit more. And you guys feel free to roast me in the comments and tell me this is an X-Men ripoff and Rip Claws of Wolverine ripoff, and these fucking characters are dashed out and thrown away as fast as they were made. You make all the arguments you want to down in the comments, and I'll listen to each and every one of them. But you hear me out first. There's a low budget genre production company from the 1980s called Cannon Films, and Cannon Films produced some of my favorite all-time movies, and they were constantly looking at what's mainstream famous. Let's make the low budget version of that, and let's crank out as many movies as we can. We're going to spend as little amount of money as we can to produce the most amount of movies. And they were in large part bad movies. I love the art of bad movies. I love these weird, because there are movies like, say a movie like Mad Max will come out. Well, the first Mad Max was made for such little money. And it might not have been the first Mad Max. It might have been Road Warrior, the sequel, that really blew it up and made it a genre of its own. But Mad Max and Road Warrior were made so cheaply and made so much money that an entire genre of low budget, shot in the desert, car fighting, post-apocalyptic movies sprung up, and hundreds, if not thousands, of these almost no budget movies were dashed out. And anytime I find them, whether it be on VHS or whether it be on Tubi or whatever, I try to watch all of those. It happened to Road Warrior and Mad Max. It happened to the Terminator. There are rip-off Terminator movies that are all killer robot time travel crazy movies. It happened to Alien. Alien had a ton of like weird monster in a haunted house on a ship, like monsters attack astronauts type movies. It happened to Dune. When Dune came out, David Lynch's Dune 1984, when it came out, a whole subgenre of weird epic fantasy desert movies with the Messiah as the main character movies came out. And so you sit here and tell me Cyberforce, Image Comics, those aren't worth any money. I don't care about that. I couldn't care less. I bought this for 40 cents and it's worth every penny of that. And if you also tell me that it's nothing but an X-Men ripoff, and that Ripclaw is nothing but a Wolverine ripoff, I don't care. Like that makes me like more interested in it, because I love knockoff, low budget. And the funny part, so the what's weird about comics, especially like 90s speculator comics, is that it's sort of the opposite of a cult movie. A cult comic is something that cost millions of dollars to produce, because these guys were getting paid absurd amounts of money in the beginning to write and draw these comics, and they were super, like, everybody has them. They aren't like hard to find. You find them in every dollar bin in every comic book shop in America. Every antique shop you go to that has a comic book section, you'll find Image Comics in there. These the ones produced during the speculator boom. So a cult comic is more like a book that was overproduced, isn't worth anything, cost a shitload of money to actually make when it was originally drawn, and that most people have discarded as garbage and trash and worthless. Well, here I am. I'm here for it. And I'm here for Cyberforce and books like it. And I'm going to cover a lot of books like Cyberforce. We're going to cover Eric Larson's Freak Force. We're going to cover Super Patriot. We're going to cover The Pit. We're going to cover many more issues of the Max. We're going to cover, I adore early Image Comics, and the crappier and more ripoff and the more worthless, the better. You bring it on. We got Ripclaw over here. We got Velocity. They've escaped their cyber data, a place that they were experimented on and turned into mutant-like characters. Monday, 7:54 a.m. A private estate somewhere in Westchester, New York. I like this place. Be nice to have a picnic out here, but not right now. Right now I've got to run. That's what I do best, ever since I can remember. Don't remember ever being on a picnic, though. Don't remember lots of stuff. Those scumbags at Cyberdata made sure of that. Let me get my little pencil out here. Doing the mind sweep, putting it in a brain box. Hell, if it weren't for Cyberforce, I'd be some kind of high-speed killer zombie by now. Cyberforce saved my butt, took me in, said I could join them. All I got to do is qualify. Jeez. I love these Image Comics robots and cyborgs and guns, machines, vehicles. They are just bizarre looking. They don't look like this is some kind of a monster or some kind of a robot that she's fighting here, and it is so cool looking. You're a little kid, little boy, and you like monsters and robots, and zombies and dragons and hot chicks and skin tight outfits. Word. She comes to a clank. She comes to a stop. Where did that come from? That was too close. Should have been paying attention. Gotta get focused. She's like bouncing away from it. Clink, clack, clack. I don't know. Is this a different? Because this is yellow and then this is red. So did she jump out of the way of the yellow one and now she's got a red one to contend with? These Image Comics don't like drawing backgrounds, so it's always hard to tell where your characters are in space and what the hell they're doing. All we have is sort of some the indication of, I guess, trees in the background here with these green blobs, and then what I suppose is the sky with the gradient blue there, blue hue there. It's hard to say otherwise. Scary, but slow. I can handle that. It ain't no picnic, but it ain't that bad. Wonder what else is out here. This is a cool double page spread. You got that full panel that goes across the top there, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that go across. And I like how this panel just barely comes across that break in the page. I like that layout. And then boom! So double splash to we go from this nice. It's a full splash page, but 2 panels on it stuck into it, and then a double splash, and then another splash. Ripclaw, did you see that? Told you I could do it, and you thought I was too young. These droids are not dangerous, Velocity. Defeating them can only give you a false sense of security. You need a worthy opponent, a creature of flesh and blood, fueled by desire, driven by need, trained to hunt and kill. Yeah, well, maybe later, okay? I better get going. This is all just a game to you, isn't it? What do you mean? Running away from robots, as if that could somehow simulate the horrendous hazards of true combat? Yeah, well, I know a game we can both play. It's called Deer Meat. The rules are quite simple. Scrack! He tries to slash her head off. Hits a tree instead. I'm a big, bad, hungry bear. You're a tasty little fawn. It's a nice booty shot there. Nice little. I like the form, Velocity. I give you a head start. You find your way back to Subplex. If you make it, you live. If you don't, you're deer meat. Now run, little one. Run for your life. Run like a fawn from the big bad bear. Whoosh. I don't know why Ripclaw's gone nutsoid, but I've seen that look before, and I know what it means. I'm out of here. It's an interesting first issue. It just kind of throws us into the action and the characters here. We get introduced to everybody slowly through the issue. I like that shot there. I like this shot up here of Ripclaw with his claws all around Velocity, if you can see that. Then that shot of his face. I should have warned you about these woods. These woods. It's like a brown. It's like a brown ground, I guess, with very little hatching, and then the shadows of his claw, and then a completely white background. So that's the woods. We're conveying that that's the woods here in Image Comics. That's all right. So pay attention. This is for real, flesh and blood, tooth and nail, you and me. I'm not a robot or a hologram. I am alive. And you, my pathetically naive little red-headed runaway are. And then he gets smoked by Heatwave. I like that pink and the Kirby crackle all around the pink there. Oomph, he says. It's Bazact. That's enough, Ripclaw. I don't know what you're doing or why, but I don't like it. And I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to stop you. Is that clear? She doesn't belong here, Heatwave. She's just a girl. It's not what she thinks. Velocity's old enough to make up her own mind. This is what she wants. She's got her whole life ahead of her. She doesn't understand. We deal in death. We also save lives. What kind of life is this? We're all just walking time bombs. Can't you hear it? The clicking never stops, just keeps getting louder. Ripclaw, why don't we... Leave me alone! All of you, just leave me alone! So we definitely have some Wolverine vibes here. If you agree with me there, drop a comment. Drop a comment. Ripclaw is a rip off. Rip off. Wolverine rip off. Ripclaw rip off. That's okay. We like him anyway. I like all this shit. That's all I did when I was 12. Watch horror movies and read these worthless Image comics that are ironically worth less now than they were back in the 90s when I originally bought them off the shelf. I really like this dude. Warblade. He's cool. He can change the shape of his hands, his claw hands. I'm a sucker for claw hands, so anybody that's got claw hands, especially the kind that can like change shape and everything, yeah, you got me. You got me. I like his outfit. I like his like big green ponytail that just like waves off into the into the ether. Again, no background here. It's just a gradient white to green, and then some smoke around their feet with Ripclaw in the foreground, and some green gradient down here. So green gradient to blue gradient. That's all we get as far as background goes. And then in these panels, we get like a black and gray background in both of these, and not only in the shot that's supposed to be against the blue background just changes to black, but also when Ripclaw wakes up, he's got this black and gray background, a black ground, if you will. Anyway, a little bit more work here. We got these Image teams, like, and there's many more teams. Youngblood, like I said, Freak Force. There's a great Image, great X-Men ripoff teams in Image, and they all hang out in these like high tech, like cyberpunk future buildings. So that's what we get here. They're in what did Ripclaw call that at the beginning? Sub something. Oh, it was before that. Subplex. So this is Subplex. This is the interior for Subplex. So let's give it up to Marc Silvestri for, at least drawing a couple backgrounds in his book. We actually get a bookshelf, or we get books stacked on a drawer here, and whatever that is, whatever these lines are supposed to represent on the background there, and then another table, a wall, and the bed sheets. At least we get a little bit. And that's it. Killer Instinct continues in Wildcats number 6. Now, an ongoing series. So I guess we're jumping into the middle of this. Cyberforce number 1, I guess, jumps us into the middle of a story that I guess, Homage Studios crossover Killer Instinct prologue, is what it says here. So this must be a continuation of the Youngblood storyline. These guys must have come out of Youngblood, and then now they're popping into their own series. So we'll take a look at those Youngbloods too. We're going to take a look at all of it. Got nothing but time, because the comics industry killed Ed Piskor, and now you're stuck with me till they kill me too. So we'll see you at the dollar bin, gang. Remember to keep on digging.